Okay, we're live.
Oh, hey there. Do you need a new way of taking your mind off of a global pandemic? A new way of trying to maintain some semblance of a normal operating mode in a time of a global pandemic? Well, let me recommend to you waking up at 5 a.m. and digging some big-ass holes. Yes, that's right, digging holes. Preferably as early in the morning as you can possibly wake up, so you don't get heat stroke. The bigger the better. This is a big asshole. I didn't even have the ability to dig all of this hole myself. I had to use also a machine. Also rocks. Moving rocks is really great when you can't write or feel like you have any creative juice left in you. Move yourself some rocks from here to there and be very meticulous about where you place them. That's right. Move rocks, dig holes, feel better.
Welcome. Welcome to the University of Arizona MFA program's 2020 Distinguished Visitor Series in Creative Writing. Thank you all. Oh my gosh, so many of you. I'm looking at the roll call here from so many places for joining us here in the ether. I'm Kate Bernheimer, and I'm a professor in the Department of English. And along with my colleague, Ander, who is acting as best boy tonight, personing the virtual camera, I have the pleasure of co-directing this series. I'd like to here again thank the Department of English and Antigone Books for co-sponsorship, and bravo, MFA students who've shared their short films tonight. These will play again after our show. They're sheer delight. It is, on my document here, it says quite appropriately, it is Thursday, October 8th, 2020. We are not here Thursday, October 8th, 2020. Oops, it's October 22nd, if I am correct. It is a Thursday in 2020, and we're here to celebrate 6 of our very own MFA program's alumni who've recently published new books. Alumni of the University of Arizona's MFA program in creative writing have published collectively over 1,000 books, which wouldn't matter were each title not so differently beautiful, truthful, and brave. These 6 newest editions make us so proud of our history. Your books remind us that through the shared ritual of storytelling, whatever its form, essay, novel, cave drawing, poem, manifesto, comic, or hymn, we connect to ancient times and we connect to each other in mysterious and meaningful ways. Tonight is a celebration of 6 special voices on one special evening. Each reader will be introduced separately, and I'll be introducing each introducer, as is our way here at the University of Arizona's MFA program. My colleague, a triple threat author of nonfiction, fiction, and poetry, whose next book, Predator, is forthcoming from Grey Wolf Press, Ander Munson, will now introduce Bethany Maile.
Thanks, Kate. And thanks to you all for coming tonight with us. I'm really excited to be here and to get to help rep and listen to each of you read. I haven't had all of you as students, but I had several of you as students, and I regret not having the rest of you as students. But I'm here to introduce Bethany first. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I wish I could put Bethany on the camera here too as I introduce her. I think that would be a nice feature, but might be a little bit obnoxious to do. Anyway, this afternoon, I rated Bethany Maile's 2011 aesthetic statement. The accompanying critical introduction, yeah, that's why I want you on camera, so you can see. It's the accompanying critical introduction the MFA program asks writers to produce in combination with their thesis, hoping to find some embarrassing nugget, was why I was going there, that I could bring to you by way of introducing her for tonight's reading. Usually these documents include at least a few grandiose claims that the writer would go on to have a hard time living down. And here I would also ask you not to interlibrary loan my own MFA thesis for self-protection reasons. Unfortunately, I could not find anything sufficiently entertaining to reproduce here. The best I could do was to pull one slightly over-the-top quote from it, a description of her next project, quote, "I hope to taunt the idea of fields," unquote, which I don't really understand at all. But then I read on and she explains that the fields of Eagle, Idaho are, quote, "both a type of conquest and a form of wilderness, opportunities for growth and transformation, even the fields of vision we rely on to see this place," unquote. So this was the most half-assed that Bethany Maile got during her time in the program, which doesn't even get her in the top quartile of our MFA graduates. Very frustrating. I had hoped that it would be a lot more embarrassing, but that's the best I could do. In fact, her thesis was in fact basically the book she's reading from tonight, published this fall by the University of Nebraska Press. Anything Will Be Easy After This is both an ode to and taunting of those fields in Eagle, Idaho, as well as by extension the American West, which is by extension America. Idaho is not a place I would have imagined that I could have developed feelings about, but reading her book, I found myself more and more enamored of it, somehow consumed with a desire to go to unlovely Eagle, Idaho, home of the world's largest Rocky Mountain oyster feed, a matrix of tract houses and McMansions and strip malls, as she writes, otherwise best known for being the place where actor George Kennedy died. Thanks, Wikipedia, for that. But yet, as she points out, the industry of eagle is development itself. And the industry of development, especially in the West, is story. And Maile's interrogations of the stories eagle and all of America tells itself have lots of fireworks in them, as I would imagine eagle does for the 4th of July, even if there seems to be a non-zero possibility of those fireworks accidentally lighting fields on fire as the state gets drier and drier. All of this is to say that it doesn't matter what you write about. A master of fine arts, such as Bethany Maile, can make anything beautiful and fabulous out of anything, even eagle. And so she has. Welcome back to the MFA program, Bethany Maile.
Oh, guys, thank you, Andrew. That was a little bit mortifying and so very generous and kind. And thank you, Kate, for helping to put all of this together. I'm just going to jump right in. I'm reading an excerpt from a chapter titled Ladies' Night at the Shooting Range. The man at the counter is everything I expect. A mustache, an American flagged shirt, revealingly snug jeans, a Glock 45 strapped to his waist. It is massive, a thing of action films. The weapons make me uneasy. It feels like they could go off with zero prompting, phantom trigger fingers rocketing bullets from their chambers. What brings you shooting, he asks. The walls are lined with shotguns and rifles, mounted in a corner of flintlock the color of sawdust. Any reason, he asks again. Just curious. I stare into the glass case, all those pistols shining. On my 8th birthday, my father brought my gift in from the garage. Open it, he said. I slid apart the cardboard, mock wood plastic in a cold metal barrel, its body the color of chestnuts. I felt the gun's balance in my palms. Tied to the barrel hung a pack of BBs, shining in silver like comets. I swung it to my shoulder and closed one eye, just as I'd seen my father do. In the backyard, he lined up empty Coke cans on our fence. He swung the gun up, and then a quick ping, and the soda can flew. Now you. I drew one breath and held it. I closed both eyes. My parents' yard of birches and cottonwoods disappeared. I exhaled and squeezed back my finger. The can spun and collapsed, that bright, round pop. From here, that chapter kind of just marches through the Old West outlaws that I really kind of idolized as a kid. But really, this chapter is about plotting my disenchantment with the gun. So for tonight, we'll just jump to one key moment that served as sort of an initial barrier between me and gun culture, and we'll see where that leaves me at the shooting range. Idaho is home to the last remnant of gunslingers, men who live in Earp and Cassidy's shadows. From the mid-1970s to 2001, one of the oldest and most extreme neo-Nazi outposts camped in northern Idaho. For a long time, Idaho was known for the white supremacists and potato farms and little more. How embarrassing. Into those same mountains, Randy Weaver moved his family from the Midwest. Obsessed with apocalypse, Weaver hoped the isolation would prove a haven when civilization ended. Inevitably, Weaver crossed paths with the Aryan Nation, an anti-government zealot. He sold illegal firearms to the white supremacists, and soon enough, an undercover officer was onto him. Weaver was subpoenaed but never showed in court. If Weaver wouldn't come to them, U.S. Marshals would go to him. The details of the event, now known as the standoff at Ruby Ridge, are hazy. We know that in late summer of 1992, 2 marshals walked onto Weaver's land, and his hounds, sniffing a strange scent from the dirt path, howled. His son, 14-year-old Sammy, knew the dog's barks meant visitors or maybe game he could hunt. The boy went down the mountain path, a .22 rifle in arm. What transpired is unclear, but someone raised a gun and squeezed a trigger. That first shot fired. Rifles cracked, bullets flew, Sammy was shot dead. Weaver gathered his family, 2 teenage daughters, his wife, and a baby, and barricaded them in the cabin. Each woman lay on the ground, keeping her head low, a gun pressed to her chest. 400 marshals surrounded the property. A day passed. 300 FBI flew in. Helicopters circled overhead, a war zone, a showdown. And then, to gather her son's body, Weaver's wife opened the door. Immediately, an antsy sniper shot and killed her. Another day passed, another. Weaver ventured from his cabin once to bring in Sammy's body, and a marshal shot his arm, and his daughter made a tourniquet, and he stayed locked in his home, shotgun at his side. My family watched the FBI storm the forest on television. Neighbors sat on our couch, jaw dropped at the footage. Damn government, they would say, man's just trying to live. And this I understood. His son and wife were dead. Certainly it was sloppy police work, but I got stuck on where we'd started, a radical fundamentalist selling sawed-off shotguns to neo-Nazis. Failing to show in court, refusing to come out, I got stuck on the guns balanced across his daughter's chests. 10 days passed, with half his family dead and his wound infecting. He stumbled from his cabin, his gun raised above his head. To so much of America, Idaho was a land of anti-government religious zealots and anarchy ruled by gun-toting crazy men. I hid my daisy in the garage behind shovels and fishing poles. The shooting range is nearly empty. In the front of the store, it is just the salesman and me. Lots of people come in curious. He says, I usually let him shoot something like this. He taps the mammoth pistol at his waist. They don't come back after that. He lets out a startlingly high-pitched laugh. In the 15 years since I opened that daisy, I have become increasingly concerned about our collective attachment to the gun. Americans own more guns per capita than residents in any other country. The US is home to less than 5% of the world's population, but we experience over 30% of global mass shootings. Just 3 years after I got my air rifle, the Columbine massacre obliterated the security children assumed in a classroom. My niece, when she goes to kindergarten, will be asked to imagine a person firing a gun at her, shooting to kill. She will be told to hide behind her desk or run serpentine for the door or jump out a window. Americans shoot up synagogues and mosques and Black churches and movie theaters. In my lifetime, we've seen over 110 gun massacres. This is nothing short of very fucked up. I want to tell the man at the counter that I'm not curious about buying a gun. I'm not curious if I will feel safer with it riding heavy in my purse. I'm curious, I should say, about what it will feel like now to pick one up and lay heavy on the trigger. I'm curious if I can pull it back at all. I think of the dangers of a story that so deeply reveres lawlessness, a story that tells us we can shoot up whomever we like, whenever, because this is America and we're tough sons of guns. I think of the romanticism turned vulgar that keeps us charmed by lawlessness, that drives us to cheer on killers. I get all that, and I don't like it one bit. But beneath all my objections and nerves, a current of adrenaline pulses. I am terrified and thrilled, and there's something else too, something I can't account for, call it nostalgia. I recall my daisy, its chintzy plastic body and thin barrel and wheezing fire. I see my father tucking the gun to my shoulder for the first time, hear the pop of my first target hit. Now with the salesman waiting for me to name my game, that impulse to flatly reject this narrative dies down. To blatantly refuse the gun, to say I cannot rent a .22 to shoot for sport in a range, feels as unreasonable as unquestionably loving it. And I wonder if I should quit these binaries, the harsh extremes of acceptance versus rejection, and instead strive for some sort of in-between, to balance the beauty and the disgust, the magnificence and the rats, as Emerson says. Experience level, the salesman asks. None, and this feels true. What do you want to shoot? I look into the case, a million Black pistols spoon each other, bigger and smaller variations of the same thing. I do not know their names. I can tell a revolver from an automatic, a pistol from a rifle, and beyond that, I am lost. Nothing big, I say. He hands me a .22 semi-automatic. Magazine here, safety there, don't shoot me. This is all the training he will give. Just like that, he extends the gun to me. It is black, dull, ugly. My chest tightens. The front of the building is the store, guns for sale, a cash register, a place to buy a target. On the other side of a glass wall sits the range, 10 booths lined up like a bowling alley. We cross into it. Before I forget, you turn around with that gun in your hand, you're gonna have my rifle pointing back. I nod in agreement, and he leaves me alone with the pistol. The only person in the range, a granny next to me, fires. Even through my earmuffs, the blast is huge. Her target waves on impact. Maybe I will fire this gun and feel 8 years old again, leveling my sights and my daisy, my father commanding squint that eye, breathe deep, ease into the trigger. Maybe I will squint and breathe and ease, and the gun will kick in my hand, one dark bead in the target's forehead. I will move the paper out another 10 feet, a hold of the chest. For a split second, the outlaws I've grown ashamed of will be a world away, Weaver forgotten in his gross and mythic fame. I will not think of the rifle barrels pointing from cabin windows. I will hear the granny's gun, the basso rhythm bang, my gun's higher, quicker ping. They will fire and boom, a rhythm, an orchestra. My pulse will pound with their beat. I will send the target as far as it will go. I will riddle its chest, its head. Shells will fire one after the other. They will fly from the gun like sparks, like confetti, like hail. I will be Annie Oakley on a stallion blowing apples to bits. I will be the white hat busting my pistol from my hip. I will be alone in a hayfield, my finger heavy on the trigger, the high pop of a soda can blasted. My horse will shift at the rifle's fire and I will raise the gun again. But this does not happen. I lift the gun, I pull the trigger, my arm jumps. The shell bursts from the pistol and rolls down my shirt. How quickly the skin blisters into a crescent welt. There is Sammy Weaver dropped dead. There is my target in the shape of a man with a hole in its chest. My palms beat hot and wet. Whatever balance I'd hoped to strike to love this in the right way is impossible. The repulsion outweighs the affection, no beauty, all disgust. And the attachment I might have harbored feels trivial and self-indulgent, a frivolity demanded in exchange for very real violence. The granny reloads and fires on. I put the gun down. I still have to pay the man. That was fast, he says, dismantling the 22. Just close me out, I say. Want your target, but before I can answer, I am already gone. That's it, thanks.
Thank you so much. Am I still muted? I'm unmuted, right? Thank you so much, Bethany. That was really powerful, as I know all of the readings tonight will be. I was just thinking, I'm not only a professor in this program, I also am an alumni of this program. And when I was a student, I actually took pistol lessons with one of my professors, Joy Williams. So it was heavy nostalgia going back to those sort of frightening moments on the range there. She was a terrible shot, by the way. So that was great. These are going to be just so spectacular. I'm pleased to introduce my cherished colleague who I miss so much, Susan Briante, an incredible poet who has also recently published a debut nonfiction book, Defacing the Monument, which has been welcomed by widespread critical praise. Susan Briante will introduce Claire Meuschke.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. You hear me, right? Just give me a nod. Thank you. It's really such a thrill I've been at this program now for 7 years, teaching poetry, and it's really a thrill to see familiar faces coming back with so much success, but also to get a glimpse of the long, beautiful trajectory of work that has been produced in the program. And so thank you all. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce Claire Meuschke and her new book, her debut poetry book, Upend, which was just recently published by Noeme Press. I just want to say, as a prefatory note, I did think about Claire's aesthetic statement today, and it is probably the best aesthetic statement I have read in my 20 years of teaching. It's absolutely gorgeous, but so is her, I will now, Ander. But so is her book. So I just wanted to focus my comments on that. In Upend, Claire Meuschke investigates the archive to discover a family history. And what she discovers is what history elides. The name of her great-grandmother, listed on her great-grandfather's immigration documents as, quote, unknown Indian. But Mooshkey sees the effects of colonialism, racism, and anti-immigration settlement in the quotidian. An anti-immigration sentiment in the quotidian. In the stories of eucalyptus trees planted as an invasive species and exported as pesticide-ridden mulch, or in the names of Sherwin-Williams paint samples, such as, quote, well-bred brown and original white. Language perpetuates and carries on the legacies of our history, as Mooshkey notes when she writes, metaphor, to carry across, to transfer, especially from one word to another. There's implicit movement, like imperialism, like survival. But language is also capable of rendering beauty, which Mooshkey does throughout Upend, as when she writes, quote, morpho butterflies leave banners of blue after images on dark foliage. Throughout the book, Mooshkey is our investigator of our past and recorder of history's after images, those that color our present. Please join me in welcoming Claire Meuschke.
Thank you so much, Susan. You were so influential in the writing of this book, so I feel like I just owe so much to you. And I almost don't feel like reading anymore. That was so nice. And thank you to Ander and Kate for facilitating this. I wish I had had you. I took classes with you. I was such a brat when I was an MFA student. Yeah, I'm gonna probably not read any of the family history poems just because now I live in Oakland and I'm really close to my family and my grandparents' graves. So I'm just gonna read poems from when I was working for the Forest Service in New Mexico. And that was right before I got my MFA in Tucson. Yeah, I'll start with Sir. In this particular case, it will be noted, boss throws his arm, index pointed to mean look anywhere but at me. He calls the land his to cover, land he calls gnarly, calls her old denim. Man and I both had slinged limbs weeks apart, then weeks apart, panic. Chalk green, trucks fenced, yard boat, helicoptered livestock, eagle on a doe carcass. How to approach underground roots, spread fire, widowers a trunk. Almost ash, once in Albuquerque, I threw out expired boxes, swore quietly into a dumpster along the food bank. Kids who only ate non-perishables during school day. Hunger's a wild horse, a nest of sage, weighted in stomach. That the alleged mother was an Indian. Is it going to rain? When he shouts, I feel it in my bones. When one stopped dancing, everyone became a ghost town. I never knew the name. If you brush an anthill with a finger on sight, you can find turquoise. Some ants attracted, like some birds attracted to blue. She dropped an instance into a crease, my palm, a day after I was fingerprinted for a federal job. The cop and I talked kindergarten, crafts, crime, snowflakes, ethnicity not fitting inside the form, gave me a new draft, then showed me a sink, sincerely. I'm gonna check the comments to make sure that I'm not like, okay, cool. You can all hear me. This one's Atrocious Horizon. What made yellow? What made antlers shed? Flower out, a cactus in February. A doe she'd handle. Season without handles is out of bed before. Plans to have had sun. A lifetime left in pastime is a cowboy man, tugs his buckle out, a Chinese buffet at dusk. Tangled hue, call the dig sites ours on file, letters with no tribal replies, drill sites, asleep to gas station lights, sunflowers in the jar, coworkers get along fine, well enough, called yellow, though habit kept, a live thing dead really, they're brown in the jar. The way out is far gone, a buck and son releases testosterone, I'm bleeding in snow, a coworker, boss's nephew, wants me, apologizes his jacket smells like his trophy deer. Leftover tracks of slow, pregnant with fear. I know where you live, saw over the weekend, a red motel renovated after the oil boom. A former boss visits, talks about his jump-started heart, ketchup, mustard, annual javelina hunt, cases of beer, Stairmaster. When I speak the federal, room laughs over my mother's labor, how I came late. My supervisor, head of minerals, always says we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Here I wear my heart, the soul of my foot and mouth. Hang dry, bouquet of wild thoughts thinking, this could have been anything had I not made it this. This could have been anything had I not. I'm just gonna read one more if I have time. I'm really bad at sensing. Okay, cool. This one is about Yosemite. I used to go there every summer as a child, and it's like the most nostalgic memory I have, but I kind of was looking back on those memories and seeing the echoes of genocide, and it was kind of this like privileged little area where only San Francisco families were allowed, and it was like all the hippie parents that kind of transitioned into being neoliberal parents. So that's what I was thinking of when I wrote it. Stare at forest green to get cochineal on the page. Kids say mermaid hair, staying too long in a lake. algae saturated, comparing strands to be most attractive, slimy, boy pronounced, mosquito with a maw sound in the gazebo. A new age woodsman with a pet bobcat approaches, says that's tits, to every remark, neutral to good. Hard plastic cups smell burnt between red and transparent. Yosemite printed on objects in half-assed cursive. Feeling bad for mules and donkeys who stay in the pen while horses go out. Disappointing tie-dye results, fireworks, I want my own Independence Day. Mariposa Battalion was federally hired to make a human clearing, a pristine wonder, Hunter's Green. They set fire to Awanichi homes and heard the word Yosemite, thought the people were Yosemite. The word means killers. In relic bronze 6403, plaques, photos, voices over. I don't feel like talking, like I mean, voiced over. Thanks all.
Thank you, Claire. That was beautiful. I'm sorry that I didn't have you in the class, but I reject your characterization of yourself as a brat. Perhaps, as you said in your poem, you were not fitting the form, but that doesn't make you a brat. That makes you very brave. So thank you for that. I'm now so pleased that our own current second-year MFA student in creative nonfiction, Julie Lund, will introduce Sarah Miner, who was one of my first students here when I was hired. This is just a very special night for so many reasons. Julie Lund has work published or forthcoming at Off Assignment, Pigeon Pages, and the New York Times. Her work is intrepid and new. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks so much, Kate. I'm so excited to introduce Sarah Miner. The best way that I can think to invite you into Sarah Miner's body of work is to say that as soon as I got her new book, Bright Archive, just out from Rescue Press, I felt utterly devastated because this beautiful hybrid work would not neatly fit into any category on my very organized bookshelf. Thankfully, Sarah's writing needs no shelving, as it is nearly impossible to put down these spellbinding pages. Sarah, who also has a chapbook out from Essay Press, another forthcoming book from Noemi Press, a PhD from Ohio University, and of course, an MFA from our very own Arizona, is a masterfully experimental and experiential wizard of writing, talented in the dark arts of shape-shifting, incantation, hypnosis, and other general trickery. While many good formal writers create and work out of their own constraints, Sarah Miner's formal and visual essays perform the much more difficult and rewarding task of identifying and subverting the pre-existing constraints of the page that as writers we mostly unthinkingly abide by, and as readers we unconsciously anticipate. Sarah's writing is joyfully disobedient in the ways it challenges typical limitations of page size, text alignment, order, structure, and sense, but it is an inviting challenge that welcomes its readers to participate alongside her in the mischief and the mysteries dealing in myth, history, place, and inheritance. Readers of Bright Archive learn that a book can be a rotating world in a universe all unto itself, with essays that must be read in circular motions, ideas spiraling ever closer towards the center, and expectations always flipped on their heads. There are quilted anecdotes, knotted up lines, and architectural prose tucked in liminal spaces. In one pearl-shaped essay, Sarah writes, "Before it got a bad name, storytelling was one way to explain the unfathomable." Sarah's writing is itself unfathomable, both in the way it performs unimaginable and magical feats, and also in its immeasurable depth, making this work inexplicably magnificent. Without further ado, it is my great honor to welcome to your screen, Sarah Miner.
Hi, I'm Sarah Miner. Thanks to everyone for being here tonight. I'm going to read most of a visual essay called Log Cabin Quilt Square. 1. Professor Wendell Arneson taught painting for 37 years and told his students to work quickly, to save all the scraps, to walk 20 feet back from an easel, have a quick look, a blink, and keep going. Wendell made everyone paint with knives and putty scrapers and iridescent paper, and showed them how to find the color a canvas was missing in the accidents along the edges of their palettes. When he danced in the studio in Minnesota, he kept his eyes closed and the exhaust fans on and lifted 2 peace signs alternately. He wore red or black. He'd gather everyone in the middle of the classroom and start whispering. Then he'd pin down a scrap of canvas with one hand and start scraping at it with his wet brush in the other. Go fast, he'd urge. Try overlapping this with that. If the composition seems unbalanced, cut it in half. Then you have 2. Then try this. And his students would huddle in, craning their necks over shoulders, glancing side-eye. Yada, 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 he'd trail off. Then he'd make a wide O with his mouth, hook a finger behind his cheek, and pluck it, like a starting gun. Wendell began every class with a shelter assignment. Make a painting, he said, then make a shelter somewhere inside it. For him, I painted cocoons, printed shells, and carved shacks into my drawings. I left clues. I saved a place to live inside every composition. 2. In Iowa, my friend Lonnie and I camped in the yard at the edge of the woods behind my mom's condo, where black turkey chicks hatched on land that was once my great-grandmother's farm before she sold it to the city. We pitched a tent and pasted the ceiling with heartthrobs, men whose pecs and chins I recognized, but whose names I never knew. I drew 4-pane windows and pasted those to the gabardine walls. Night fell, and we kept a flashlight on, talked ourselves to sleep. Then we heard a child scream from the woods. The scream ascended right to its highest note and stuck there before getting choked. We stopped breathing, and my heart socked my ribs as the tent zipper bounced at the fly. My grandfather used to tease my grandmother. Some girls have a mink in their closet, but you've got one in your fridge. He met my grandmother at the University of Iowa and sold his books a week before finals to buy her a ring. They were hardback law books he'd paid for with trapping money from catching mink and fox during the summer on his mother's land out past the city. It's a rabbit, I whispered to Lonnie in the tent. Rabbits scream like a human when they're caught. Lonnie stared at me with big eyes and said, after a minute, what caught it? Then we crawled single file from the tent to the house. 3. In a log cabin quilt pattern, the diminishing lengths of patches produce the optical illusion that half of the sections recede in space or overlap on the shoulders of others, the way my father first taught me to lay branches for a campfire. We alternated 1-inch sticks and wove these with brittle twigs, filled the open center with brush. Like Lincoln logs, when stacked correctly, the pieces of a log cabin protect a cooking fire no prairie wind can spread. In this way, log cabin quilts describe how a home is a focal point. Home is a flame surrounded. The chattel house, or log cabin, is a structure that dates back to the Bronze Age. It's a design that lasted not because it was permanent, but because it was easy for people on the move to disassemble and carry with them. The most common version of the log cabin quilt design is known as barn raising pattern, which includes a variation called pinwheel, a name that reminds me how log cabins of all types suggest a clockwise turn, a cycle of rebuilding. 4. In Athens, Ohio, the company Home Ice sells water and packaged ice cubes better than homemade at the speedway in my neighborhood where 4x4s sit with their engines churning for hours every Saturday night. The concept of home is different here in Appalachia. Or perhaps I think it is because of the way my students say the word during their first semesters here at school. Home is not somewhere they were glad to leave. Home is where they are going this weekend for spring break, Easter, Columbus Day, every other weekend, and for the rest of the summer. To somewhere else, Ohio, where someone else will make them dinner, buy them beer. Home pizza is where my favorite student worked for 3 years during high school. When my student tries to show her hometown to our class using Google Earth, a semi-truck is parked in Barnesville between the three-legged camera and the doors to the restaurant, but she swears that the window there reads, just like home. 5. I had a friend who called her mother mom, even when she was talking to friends who used my mom to differentiate. On Friday, my friend would say, "My mom made us wash the dog," or "You really did convince mom that you were vomiting at my house on Saturday because you accidentally ate meat and not because we were wasted." Because my friend had a twin sister who also said mom without the my, I wondered if it was a kind of twin talk. Otherwise, the habit seemed precious, as if their mother was of a more familiar brand or a higher order, until I learned that mom was not this friend's mother at all. Mom was the woman the twins' father had married the year after their birth mother was shot by deer hunters while she was standing on their back deck. The hunters got off without charges. In this case, mom did function more like a surname, a prized name because it recalled both the absence and her surrogate, the kind of reverence I hear inside home in Appalachia, like the way God-fearing folks sometimes say scripture. Each incantation has a practice dignity, but also some type of whole. 6. Home City Ice and Water was named after Home City, Ohio, today called Sailor Park, which sounds to me like an overheard conversation. Question: home, city, answer: Ohio. 7. Home City Ice reminds me that the concept of home is not about quality or membership. Like home field, the advantage of home ice is its familiarity, that it offers no risk of surprise to a skater. Likewise, the thrill of home ice hinges on the belief that what is unfamiliar is bad because it disrupts routine. The goodness of home ice is about that ice being hallowed, about more of their fans than yours. In marketing terms, Home City Ice does not need to be sold because it already belongs to you. Except where I come from, down home still means backwardness, not comfort, as it does in Southern Ohio. I confess that I still drive past home cooking establishments for the same reason. According to my raising, the best food never came from home, but from somewhere outside of it, from a place where we were always trying to arrive. 8. In Tucson, it was dangerous to drive west at 6 in the evening because the angle of the sun made it hard to see through the windshield and impossible to read traffic lights. If you sat still at 2 in the afternoon, everything the sun touched went hollow. My skin didn't burn there, but it got harder and tougher. It retained a kind of temperature, like the hot blue of a desert sky. Sometimes at night, police helicopters would dip low over the adobe houses and shine lights across our windows, chasing, they'd say later, after someone running the neighborhood on foot. Their lights would turn the bedroom walls and the backyard silver, like sun in an old photograph, and then just as suddenly leave everyone awake in the dark, looking out at each other through our windows. 9. In college, I learned that Wendell Arneson loved a series. He made wall-sized oil paintings, always in threes, built of layered texts. Most were dotted with ladders and fences, tipped one way or the next, ways to stay in or get out. He taught me that paintings made to be viewed in a sequence can be linked by visual rhythms, repeated images that an audience will register unconsciously. See this pentagon here, he told me? You keep making it the same way, but if you hide it somewhere in each painting, change the scale and your materials, Then the viewer will know the canvases are linked, even if they don't really know. They'll know something, at least, about a home. 10. My great-grandmother, my mother, my sister, and I were all born into the same hospital. All the homes I have lived in have since been destroyed or sold to other families. It feels a kind of betrayal to those houses, not to live in Iowa or ever to expect to again. As an origin, Iowa is unique in that, unlike Ohio or Indiana, most people don't return there once they leave. 11. Question. Home city? 12. Answer. Once in Arizona, as I turned down the side of a foothill between a sharp drop and a thin shoulder, the body of a horse, rotted through with sun, rounded the inner bend, and I had to look down and through the body to follow the highway as it curved. 12. My grandfather worked at a racetrack in Virginia as a kid and held the reins of the horses having their winning photographs taken. He told us once about the time the barn burned when they had to tie mad horses to the fence. The ones they couldn't catch kept running back to their stalls in panic. Horses on fire at full speed, turning back to their bright home. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Sarah. That was incredible. One phrase really popped out to me. Forgive me if I got it wrong, but there was a phrase maybe in like part 8 where you said, from a place we're always trying to arrive. And Andrew and I were chatting before tonight about your MFA thesis in the Arizona History Museum. And I could really hear pieces of that in this, with the tents and the lights. It was so architectural for those of you who didn't get to see it. It was a real installation, and this felt like home. So that was lovely. Thank you. Welcome back. Next, we will hear, to our delight, a few words from Marley Sheehan, professor of English, head of English, to her great pleasure, most excellent author of novels, stories, novellas, and nonfiction. She can do it all. Her recent book, Once Into the Night, won the prestigious Catherine L. Doctorow Innovative Fiction Prize, and I urge you to read it if you haven't already. It'll knock your socks off. Orally, we'll introduce Jamie Poissant.
Hi, can you hear me? I hope. Jamie Poissant was my student back in the day, and now as these things go, I am his student, learning from his writing and his way of being in the world. He teaches at the University of Central Florida, and he is the author of the 2014 story collection, The Heaven of Animals. And just this year, his first novel, Lake Life. He has published fiction in the Atlantic Monthly, Plowshares, and One Story, and he's been anthologized in Best New American Writing, Best American Experimental Writing, and elsewhere. He's received numerous awards and commendations, but I'll leave it to you to read about those another day. Tonight, I just want to talk about his writing. Jamie is a master of fictional craft, dexterous with the tools of fiction, but never showy, always humbled to the story itself. This overarching capability is matched by another quality, humanity. His writing is driven by curiosity and love for people, and that perhaps is why his fiction resonates so deeply, why his characters are unforgettable. When I read Lake Life this summer, it was just what I needed, an essential antidote to the excesses of this age, and a reminder of why we're all on this planet anyway. Also, an amazing, wonderful thing about Jamie is that he reads like crazy, and he's always generous to other writers. The love he feels for books and writing is intoxicating and beautiful. I am completely honored to introduce Jamie.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Sorry. I'm a little tongue tied. Orly is one of my favorite people in the world. And that was unexpected and beautiful. And thank you very much. This novel, Lake Life, began in Orly's workshop, which was my first workshop ever in 2005 at the U of A. When I wrote a story and she had me revise it. And if she hadn't, this wouldn't have come out. So yeah, the book owes a huge debt to her class. The novel is Lake Life. It's the story of a family that spends a weekend on a lake in North Carolina. The lake is called Lake Christopher in the novel. It's based on Lake Toxaway. And the novel begins with a tragedy. A boy drowns and this guy, Michael, hits his head on a boat trying to save him. So I'm going to pick up in part 2 of the novel. I'm going to read a little section from chapter 13, which is the first chapter or one of the later chapters from his wife's point of view. So Michael and Diane are married. They've come up to the lake. They're here for the weekend. They're trying to convince Michael's parents not to sell their lake house. And they've come, in this chapter, they're going to visit this waterfall that they haven't been to in a few years. Also, you might hear some rattling in the background. I'm in the house now I share my house with 5 women, my wife and my daughters and 2 mice. And since everyone else is asleep, I'm in the mouse room and they are wide awake. So if you hear that rattling, that's just them. All right, so this is just real quick, 3 pages from Diane's chapter. It's been a while since I've seen the falls, Diane's father-in-law calls from the back seat. Years. Polite to a fault, Richard insisted Diane ride up front, though the car that he and Lisa share is a hybrid and tiny. His knees grind Diane's seat back, and no one is comfortable. Michael pulls away from the gas station, and they follow the country road west. His thumbs drum the steering wheel. A silver coffee tumbler rests between his legs. This morning, when she offered to drive, Michael only frowned and gave her the look. Diane hates this look, the way Michael narrows his eyes to make her feel dumb. You're so lucky to have a husband who doesn't raise his voice, her friends say. How to explain, though, that a few fights would be better than all this not fighting, this slow dance toward separation, toward lives lived side by side. Michael turns the radio up, and Buddy Holly is between them, crooning about a roller coaster and undying love. Anyone would think her husband is relaxed, but Diane recognizes the telltale grind of his jaw. At night, he wears a mouthguard just to keep from chewing through his tongue in sleep. It can't be 5 more miles, Richard said. I'm just saying what the guy at the gas station said, Michael says. They pass a farmhouse, an apple orchard, a wandering cow. After sleeping badly, Diane woke to more boats in the bay. She scrambled eggs, made toast, but couldn't eat. Lisa stayed in bed. Thad and Jake were off to see a friend. We have to get out of here, she said, and Michael suggested the falls. So they changed into swimsuits. Richard joined them, and at Diane's insistence, they stopped at CVS for waterproof bandages, at which point Michael and his father began arguing about their destination and how long it took to reach. Set the odometer, Richard says. He's watching trees go by. What is he thinking about, Diane wonders. Her father-in-law meditates at wavelengths beyond them all. The absent-minded professor, Lisa calls him, but there's something gorgeous in the way he's always lost in thought. Diane doesn't regret art school, only the quality of instruction she got in everything that wasn't art. More math, and who knows, maybe she could balance a budget. More geography, and maybe she could find Iceland on a map. The odometer, son, Richard says. I want to know if it's 5 miles or not. Michael does as he's asked. Of course, it's been a mile since the gas station. This will no doubt launch an argument when they arrive. They'll have to clock the mileage going back, but this is the way of families. The inconsequential elevated to the imperative. Bring 3 couples together for a week under one roof, and everything is code for something else. Michael drinks from his mug and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes say, "Can you believe my dad?" Richard leans across the back seat. In the rear view, his eyes say, "Don't worry, I know you're on my side." Diane shuts her eyes. For the next 1 to 4 miles, she'll pretend to be asleep. These men with their loud emotions, their quiet power grabs. Some days she imagines a life without men, just her and her daughter on a blanket in a field of poppies and cardinals and bright blue sky. Even the flowers in this dream have had their stamens plucked. Diane and her daughter. Then again, who says the child won't be a boy? So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. They arrive. The trail bends and pine trees beckon, needles silvered by sunlight, trunks ambered with sap. The falls grow louder, the tumble of water over rock and the splash of bodies airborne touching down. Voices rise, river to woods and wood to sky. Then they're around the bend and the river a ribbon, the water wide. The footpath forks, a choice, follow the river downstream or take the trail to the top of the falls. All is as she left it. She's not sure why. She worried things would change. A river needs no tending. A river need only not be polluted, dammed, or cut off at the source. This river has been here millennia. Yips, a yodel, and a boy is riding down the falls. The falls don't fall here exactly. They don't crest a ledge and drop in a postcard perfect way. Instead, the water rushes down an incline, ski slope steep, 3 stories. Children slalom the falls on stomachs and backs, laughing, screaming, singing. Along the riverbank, the path is gentle. The middle, though, is like a luge. More than once, Diane has watched a girl slide down and rise without her top. The falls are tricky. The water zips and wishbones so that no matter where you push off, there's no guarantee you won't be pinballed to the middle, which is why she's never braved the falls herself. The boy sliding now is tall, long hair. He slaloms all ass and holler down the incline and rodeos into the current below. He surfaces, then leaves the river charging up the trail, a whir of pink swing trunks and skinny, hairy legs. He's not from here. Men from here wear cutoffs or jean shorts or drop their pants and swim in underwear. The bills of their caps are frayed, ornamented by a single fishhook. Their tans are real, their Oakleys fake, and they drink beer from cans that aren't in paper bags. Plus, around here, men don't wear pink. Vacationers are just as easy to spot. They aren't rich, but they have money, enough to rent summer homes or stay at Blackstone Inn. Their board shorts are plaid or paisley or have Corona emblazoned on the front. They're clean cut, shaved faces, shaven chests. Their tans are fake, their Oakleys real. Then again, distinctions are growing hazier. Hipsters and trustafarians, so much denim, so many PBRs. Meeting Michael, she took him for a local before learning his parents taught at Cornell. He didn't talk like he had money, which is to say he didn't speak the way Diane at 18 assumed people with money spoke. He spoke like her. He loved her, and in time, she loved him back. In the water, a woman swims with a baby. She blows on the baby's face, dips her underwater, then quick brings her back up. Each time, the baby comes up laughing. The woman brings the baby to her chest, and she clings there, water beading on her cheeks. Diane turns, but Michael is already up the trail. Michael, she calls. I love you, she should say. I forgive you the grief you've caused me these 6 weeks now. Come back, take my hand, and together let's wander downstream. She should say this, and she won't. She won't, because what she most is to hear those words from him.
Well, it appears we may have lost Jamie.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back.
Sorry.
You're here. Oh, good. Excellent.
Oh,
Sorry,
man.
we lost you for the last minute.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was like right at the end too, I think.
Oh, no, you just go back like about a minute, maybe 90 seconds.
Oh, geez. I'm so sorry. What was the last thing I said? Oh. Okay. Yeah. Woman in the Water, the Baby. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leah. In the water, a woman swims with a baby. She blows on the baby's face, dips her underwater, then quick brings the baby back up. Each time the baby comes up laughing. The woman brings the baby to her chest and she clings there, water beading on her cheeks. Diane turns, but Michael is already up the trail. Michael, she calls. I love you, she should say. I forgive you the grief you've caused us this 6 weeks. Now come back, take my hand, and together let's wander downstream. She should say this, and she won't. She won't because what she needs most is to hear these words from him. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And I'm so glad that we got you back because there's so much life in your words. There's so much like aliveness in there. And so I'm glad that we got you unfrozen and back to life there. It makes sense that you're in a house full of women and girls and mice because there's just so much life teeming on those pages. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Before joining us at our MFA program at the University of Arizona, Sarah Ruth Bates studied philosophy at Middlebury College and then bioethics at the Harvard Medical School Center for Bioethics. Sarah Ruth Bates is now a second-year MFA candidate in nonfiction and a volunteer goat herd. I'm very jealous of this. Her work has appeared in Eon, Hobart, and elsewhere. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Kate. Am I good? Okay, great. Oh yeah, the goat herd thing is new. I'll explain later. So I have the privilege of getting to introduce Mark Polanzak. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. In his new book of stories, The OK End of Funnytown, Mark depicts a familiar kind of strangeness. The fantastical bumps up against the real, sometimes literally. A genie let out of a lamp is too big for the basement room he's released into and continually strains his neck to fit his head beneath the planks of the ceiling. On choosing his wishes from the genie, Mark's protagonist muses, there is an opportunity here that is impossible to miss and impossible to take. These are the situations that Mark writes, untenable circumstances, which the story's protagonists nevertheless continue into, because they must. It's fitting that we watched my video about my childhood basement tonight because Mark also takes the childhood basement as a subject. My current situation reads a bit like one of his plots. You go home for a week to visit your parents, and you're still there 6 months later. I can testify that he has depicted the slow drip of waiting with uncanny accuracy. I'm thrilled to hear Mark read tonight back on his home turf at the U of A. Mark teaches writing and literature at the Berklee School of Music. He and fellow U of A alum Rachel Yoder co-founded Draft, the Journal of Process, which is as cool as it sounds. You should check it out. Mark published his first book, Pop, in 2016, and he's reading tonight from the OK End of Funnytown. Please welcome Mark Polanza.
Okay, thank you for that. And I would like to hear more about the goat herd business and how that's going, Sarah. Thank you so much. And thank you, Andrew and Kate, for inviting me. I am happy to be back reading here at U of A. And all these readings have been so good so far. I'm going to do my best not to break the streak here. So I'm just gonna read one short story. It is the first short story in the collection, The OK End of Funnytown. It's called Giant, and it turns out to be just under 10 minutes. So it'll work out. Here we go, Giant. The surprisingly few eyewitness reports stated that the giant walked more or less up Main Street from the west, stepping on the pavement and sometimes in patches of trees in parks and backyards just before dawn. He stopped in the square, choosing to sit in the brick courtyard of the city hall, and leaned back against the big stone church, blocking off traffic on Elm and Putnam. Authorities discovered that he had successfully avoided stomping on parked cars and most of the city's infrastructure, but many swing sets, water fountains, jungle gyms, basketball hoops, grills, and gardens had been smushed. No one knew if any birds or squirrels likely sleeping in the parks and backyards had been flattened. The giant was still sitting in the square in the morning, a crisp and blue Monday morning in September. We found police cruisers and fire trucks parked with lights flashing in a 2-block radius of the giant. Residents of the buildings within the zone were evacuated. Businesses were closed and shuttered. There wasn't a TV or radio station broadcasting anything but news of the giant. Live footage from a helicopter aired endlessly. The giant was taller than the city hall, the stone church, and the apartment buildings, even while sitting. Few of us saw him erect. He wore baggy, tattered brown pants drawn by a red rope, an ill-fitting faded green shirt, and no shoes. He was human. He had human feet, human hands. A brown satchel was strapped around his torso. He occasionally reached into the satchel to remove handfuls of giant berries and something else that crunched and echoed throughout town. He had long, stringy blonde hair that fell on either side of his face, down to his shoulders, except in back where a few strands had been pulled and tied up with a giant red band. No one had heard him speak. No one, as far as we knew, had attempted to communicate. Since the giant seemed to have purposefully avoided crushing our homes and cars and had made no indication that he wanted to hurt us, we did not panic. Even the flashing lights and sirens did not inspire anxiety. The newscasts were not fear-driven. The reporters were curious. It wasn't an emergency to anyone. It was awe-striking. Eventually, the sirens were silenced. The flashers were shut off. You could hear laughter in the streets. When he reached for some more food, there were gasps of joy. Children were held up on shoulders to have a look. The mayor, around 3 o'clock that first day, was raised up on a cherry picker and handed a megaphone. He said to the giant, "Hello." The whole town was silent, awaiting a response. When after a minute had passed and the giant had reached for another handful of food, the mayor repeated himself, added his name, title, the name of our city, and a welcome message. To our great delight, the giant finally acknowledged the mayor, turning to him and emanating a ground-shaking 3-syllable reply. But we could not understand. He was not an English speaker. Professors from the language department at the university listened to the recording, determining that it was not something they had ever heard before. Linguistic anthropologists then went to work on the recording. They were not sure either. Verbal communication was placed on hold. None of us went to work that first day. No child went to school. Many of us chuckled after remarking that the giant had put things in perspective. Our work seemed small. Our school seemed small. The giant was all we cared about, and no one disputed it. How could we get our paperwork done with this giant down the street? How could any teacher concentrate on her lesson? There was no way our kids were going to do math problems with a real live giant outside. The influx of reporters and visitors slammed our streets and hotels and bars and restaurants that first night. You could talk with the person seated next to you. There wasn't a chance they'd be discussing anything else. You could talk with anyone on the street. What do you do in a situation like this? He doesn't want to hurt us. He can't talk with us. He just looks tired, don't you think? He keeps sighing and eating. Have you seen that he fell asleep? He sleeps with his head resting on the post office. Did you hear him snore? It sounds like low rolling thunder. Yes, it was soothing. And how he scoops gallons of water from the river with his hand. Although the mayor had spoken with him, no one had attempted to touch him until the third day. After town meetings to devise the best plan to approach the giant, it was decided that the mayor and 30 policemen would carry flags with every conceivable piece. We decided on offering a barrel of orange juice, a loaf of bread the size of a school bus. We would place these before him and back away, waiting for him to notice that we were being kind. Then the mayor and policemen would walk closer and closer, extending hands and shaking each other's hands to demonstrate what we meant. Everything went as planned, but the giant never reached down to touch anyone. When the mayor got close enough, he touched the giant's heel. The giant did not notice. This was frustrating. He ate the bread in a single chomp. He tossed the barrel of orange juice into his mouth, crunched and swallowed. He went back to sighing, wiping his brow and resting. The giant is not interested in us. He is not curious about us in the slightest. He eats, drinks, rests, sighs, and sleeps. He has made no attempt to look any of us, save for the mayor that first day, in the eye. He has not thanked us for the food. He has not apologized for trampling our parks and gardens and recreation areas. He has not offered any help of any kind. Not long ago, we began to wonder why we were so curious. What, apart from his obvious size, made him any more interesting than any of us? Why were we constantly talking about him for days and weeks on end? Why were we fascinated every time he reached for his satchel or scratched his forearm? We all still talked to each other, but the conversation turned. We had waited long enough. We wanted to know if anything was going to happen or if we were just going to have to live with a giant in our square, a dumb oaf that caused people to move out of their homes, that caused the government to move their offices of City Hall and the post office to other buildings. If he were of normal size, he would be completely uninteresting. He would be mentally deficient, mangy. We would pity him. He contributed nothing. He took, he stole, he trespassed, he destroyed. He frustrated and incensed. He was boring. When we travel, when we mention where we live and people ask, isn't that the town with the giant? We sigh and say, yes. When we return home, we ask if he's still there. And our neighbors give the sarcastic answer, oh, it wouldn't go anywhere. Don't you worry. When we walk to the bus stop, we glance up at him with as much amazement as we do down to our watches. We know what we'd see. We would see a giant sitting there, eating and drinking. We'd see a tired monster, not interesting enough to even hurt us. We'd see him wipe his brow. Then we'd check the time. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That really, the way that you read and the syntax with which you write, which is so folkloric, really reminds us like that this is our hearth. Right here, our glowing screens are the hearth, and we are here to, to practice this ritual that's been with us as long as we can remember anyway. Thank you so much for reading that story. It's terrific. And now, dear audience members, please join me in welcoming our current MFA program director, our captain, our friend of fiction, Manuel Munoz. Manuel's newest story collection, Consequences, is that the correct titles? Yes, is forthcoming from Grey Wolf, and he has steered our proud ship through a lot of stormy weather these recent months. Consequences, yes. So thank you, Captain. Manuel will here bring us home, introducing our final reader tonight, John Washington. So over to you, Captain Munoz.
Good evening, everybody. As I'm welcoming everybody here and also with the Despedida, thanks again to Andrew and Kate for organizing all of this, and special thanks again to Andrew for starting this tradition. I say this every year, that we get to have this moment in the fall that matches the energy and the spirit that we get at the end of the year when we celebrate everybody. But welcome home, everybody. I'm in here to introduce John Washington, who graduated from our program, I want to say about 10 years ago. It's almost 10 years ago. He was part of our fiction cohort. And while he was here, his interest in and commitment to border life and community was already evident. He's got a lot of stories to tell. And John, I just want to tell you, I miss our platicas, I miss our little cups of coffee. I really do. His work, his inquiry and his activism took him to Mexico for a time, where his literary talents in translation and reportage found a home with writers from all across the Americas. And with our equally esteemed alum, Daniela Ugaz, he translated Oscar Martinez's The Beast, Riding the Rails and Dodging Narcos on the Migrant Trail for Verso Books. This was in 2014. And again with Daniela, he received a 2017 Penn Translates Award from the English Penn Organization for Alberto Arce's Blood Barrios, Dispatches from the World's Deadliest Streets. And he returns this year with The Dispossessed, a story of asylum at the US-Mexican border and beyond, again from Verso. And that and beyond is really key tonight, as John's work with The Nation includes the Migrant Voices series. And I urge you to check this out online. It's dedicated to the chronicling of firsthand accounts of migrants from all over the world, Nigeria, Ukraine, Syria, China, everywhere. We're really proud tonight to welcome back, say bienvenido de nuevo, y adelante, John Washington.
Thanks, Manuel. I too miss our platicas and our coffee. And thank you for the generous and lovely intro. And thanks to everyone else for setting this up and these great readings. This has been fantastic. So I'm going to read just a little bit from The Dispossessed. And the original, you mentioned the subtitle, Manuel. My idea for the subtitle was going to be an essay on asylum. And when the book was still in production, and I had a conversation with one of the editors and a couple of people on the marketing team, and they're like, essay, like on the cover of a book? That's so scholastic. That's like just not that interesting. No one's gonna like it. I was like, what? Like, you need to go like take a few classes from UA MFA program and like to really appreciate the word essay and like what it means and like that rich, bounteous history that it has. But it ended up being a story of asylum, etc. And the way, like what I tried to do with the book was tell the story of the idea of asylum itself and just trace the history of it, like go as far back in history as I could possibly go. And you can trace it as far as history goes pretty much. And so I told that like political historical, or try to tell that political historical story. And then I also try to tell the literary story of asylum. And there's these just amazing and beautiful passages in like these ancient Judaic codes, in the Book of Numbers, in some of the ancient Greek playwrights. Aeschylus and Sophocles write plays about asylum, or like tracing it just like throughout history, this principle of offering sanctuary or hospitality. Virgil touches on it, like the early Christian church, like Islam has it baked into like its foundations. and then like just tracing it through the Middle Ages and trying to tell that story, and also like chasing the literary thread as well. And at the same time, like you can't tell the story of asylum without talking about asylum seekers or asylees today. And so what I did was try to follow a few asylum seekers. And there's one man, Arnovis, from El Salvador, and he sought asylum a few different times from the United States. And I try to just tell his story as closely as possible. So I got to know him very well. I like stayed at his house for a long time and got to know his daughter. On his third attempt to seek asylum, find safety in the United States, he was separated. That was in 2018 at like the height of the family separation crisis, separated from his daughter, Maybelline, and sent back without her. And so I just tried to follow his footsteps, like literally chase his story and chase his and Maybelline's story. And then, you know, squash it all in with this just insane political situation that we're in, which, you know, is often talking about asylum. And you know, we missed the debate tonight, or part of the debate, but I guess they touched on migration a little bit. But it's better that we're here. So I'm going to read a couple of pages from the epilogue. So a bit of a spoiler is that they're under constant threat of death, Arnovis and Maybelline, but they are reunited, and they still have survived. So the epigraph is from Emiliano Meuschke. And for a few seconds, all that can be heard are the whisperings of the men and women crossing the borders. For nearly 3 months after he was deported from the United States for the second time, Arnovis hardly left the family property. When he did venture out, he kept his gaze down, avoided contact with neighbors, and didn't reach out to old friends or to anybody else. By late August, he couldn't handle the isolation and started sneaking out for a few hours of paid work, installing a barbed wire fence with Mongoyano posts, clearing a plot of land, or harvesting cashews. By late September, after having burned through a number of long-term projects, he had even finished building his sister's house. He was desperate for steady income. Despite the perceived danger, he went back to the ranch in Isla de Mendez, where he'd worked earlier in the year. His old boss gave him his job back, offering $7 a day for the same hot grunt work, harvesting corn for cattle feed, lugging around tubs and sacks, rolling out lines of barbed wire, hind-slapping cows into the corral, and shoveling manure. Maybelline, meanwhile, still seemed touchy, not her old goofy self. She'd engage by kicking around her yellow soccer ball, disciplining her pig, or playing with the puppies. But she was quieter than before, would stare off into space, throw uncharacteristic tantrums, and turn nervous when Arnovis left her side. The whole family kept a close eye on her, and Arnovis worried that the effects of the separation and the journey were lying dormant and would erupt at some point later in her life. Maybelline liked to remember the little baby she saw in the safe houses in Mexico, or the long snake-like bridge they passed underneath the US border. But what other details, he wondered, what other moments did she remember or forget? Arnovis wasn't sure if the gang knew he was back. Probably they did, but what could he do? He started thinking about trying to head north a third time, a fourth if you count his first deportation from Mexico. He told me repeatedly that he's ready to leave. The next few days, the next week, the week after that, but plans never materialized. He waited for his pro bono attorneys in Texas to see if they could find a way to parole him into the United States, though the bar for being granted protection with a prior deportation would be significantly higher. And even if you were allowed to remain in the US, you would not be eligible for citizenship and could never leave the country without losing his protected status. He waited for WhatsApp messages from his lawyers that came weeks late. Hang tight, they told him. We're looking for options. Options never came. One day in October, picking up some gasoline for the chainsaw and the water pump. There's no gas station in Corral, though a few families sell fuel in gallon-sized water bottles. He saw two young men he didn't recognize. Hey, vato, one of them called to him. Loan me $2. It wasn't a loan, it was a tax. Sure, he said, and handed over a couple of bills. You from here? Yeah, Arnobi said. The two gang members were both side-eyeing him as he turned and walked away, a bottle of light yellow combustible fluid in each hand. I asked if he was nervous during the interaction. He said he was. You get used to it, he told me, but not really. You expect it, he corrected himself, but you don't get used to it. Beto, my Mexicano cicerone, told me about a tactic that's sometimes used for tax collection in the capital city. A gang member sachets up to you in that smooth, limping gangster walk, digs into his pocket, and then pulls out a single bullet. You see this? See this bullet? The tax collector pinches it between thumb and forefinger, holding it up to the sky. The bullet only costs $1, he says, but it'll take you to a whole other world. If you want to stay in this world, at least for today, you better fork over $2. Arnovis wants to stay in this world. He needs to, for Maybelline. When the tax collectors come to collect, he pays. In the evenings, at the Sudanese camp behind the supermarket of Calais, France, Daniel Trilling reports in Lights in the Distance, men would sit around the fire and burn their fingertips. They were mutilating themselves to avoid detection by the Eurodac police database. Quote, you put one end of a metal pole in the fire, one of the men said, and wait for it to go red hot. Then take it out and run your fingertips along the glowing end one by one for an hour or two until they're too blistered to be recognized by a scanning machine. Identity is as singular as a fingerprint, but harder to blister away. If you are persecuted because of an immutable characteristic, because of who you are, you may qualify for asylum. Asylum seekers looking for protection from the state are asking, can I be? The answer comes back, yes, but only if you cannot be. We can only grant you permission to be here if, because of who you are, you cannot be there. What pieces of their identities, leaving their home, their culture, their language, their family, are asylum seekers willing to burn away to stay alive? What gauntlets of suffering are we forcing them to run before we are willing to bring them in under our roof? In order to live, you must be unable to live. The border is more than a physical obstruction, more than a wall or a fence, more than a line on a map, more than a political organizing tool. The border produces and maintains extreme levels of inequality. Some live and live comfortably, and some suffer and suffer miserably. For asylum seekers, the border is the knife edge of the crisis, the turning point, as Hippocrates defined crisis, toward either recovery or death. Some shall live is what the border says. Some. I'll end there, and because I'm the last reader, I think, right? And I can't cap it off with my own word, I'll make this plug to buy all these great books because they're great and because it really helps. It's good for the authors and the publishers, and it's just like what we should all be doing. So yeah, thanks.
John, I think that was the perfect ending to this, in a kind of bittersweet way, right? As all endings are, as the ancients knew too. Thank you so much for that. That was just, yeah, I can't wait to read The Dispossessed. Thank you so much. Thank you all, seriously, from the bottom of our hearts for joining us here tonight. We feel your presence and we are grateful to you. To all of our alumni, congratulations on your books. You carry the torch forward for what we do in this program. You're a light to our current students. You bring meaning to our work and to your readers. Your words make a big difference in how we experience being, right? So thank you so much. It was really a nice, I don't know, really special experience. So sorry, I'm a bit moved. So stay safe, be okay. Good night. Thank you for joining us. And please stay in touch. Buy the books, like John says. Buy them directly from the publisher or independent bookstores. Thank you. See you soon, I hope.
Oh, hey there. Do you need a new way of taking your mind off of a global pandemic? A new way of trying to maintain some semblance of a normal operating mode in a time of a global pandemic? Well, let me recommend to you waking up at 5 a.m. and digging some big-ass holes. Yes, that's right, digging holes. Preferably as early in the morning as you can possibly wake up, so you don't get heat stroke. The bigger the better. This is a big asshole. I didn't even have the ability to dig all of this hole myself. I had to use also a machine. Also rocks. Moving rocks is really great when you can't write or feel like you have any creative juice left in you. Move yourself some rocks from here to there and be very meticulous about where you place them. That's right. Move rocks, dig holes, feel better.